Stop saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View is karma. There's no such thing as karma, sorry. Sorry, but life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hilarious.
Black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class? I mean...
Welcome back to AllStarBuzz. Thank you for joining us. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Now, let's begin. They say karma always finds a way to strike, that when someone does wrong, the universe has a funny way of balancing the scales. But what if that's just a comforting myth? What if life doesn't hand out consequences, it just happens? Recently, a wave of speculation flooded social media after Whoopi Goldberg's sudden absence from The View came right on the heels of her heated clash with a certain public critic.
Above any matters of politics or what's right or wrong, the one thing I know for sure about America is this. It's run by mean girls. Mean girls in the press and in politics and in life. And when they smell blood in the water, the lust to finish off a vulnerable person will never be denied.
Many viewers rushed to call it karma, assuming some sort of cosmic justice was at play. But that idea was swiftly dismissed with a cold dose of realism. Life isn't fair, and it doesn't come with a built-in scoreboard. When a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions, it's not karmate's chaos. And chaos doesn't need a reason.
You love to speak truth to power, and we always should, but you have completely lost the ability to speak truth to bullshit.
This story doesn't begin with justice served. It begins with a clash of egos, ideology, and a mainstream platform that has long become a magnet for controversy. The View isn't just a talk show, it's a stage where narratives are crafted, where groupthink often overshadows nuance, and where dissent is met not with debate, but with disdain. So, when Whoopi Goldberg found herself at the center of the storm, it wasn't because of fate, it was because of what she said, how she said it, and who she said it to. Her words ignited a fire that's still burning, and as we peel back the layers of this media moment, one thing becomes clear. This wasn't karma, it was a collision, one that would unravel everything to come. And that collision? It didn't come quietly. It came with sharp words, unfiltered critiques, and a takedown that left the studio echoing long after the segment ended. The heart of the clash was Whoopi Goldberg's attempt to respond to a pointed critique about performative wokeness, term that's become more than just a buzzword. It's the dividing line between what some see as genuine activism and what others see as theatrical self-righteousness. Whoopi, known for her fierce opinions on The View, stepped into the ring with confidence. But what followed wasn't a debate, it was a rhetorical unraveling. She questioned comments about what Black Americans actually want: better jobs, stronger communities, and policing that works. But instead of engaging with those core issues, she detoured into tangents, invoking unrelated political narratives and abstract grievances. Her response wasn't grounded, it was scattered, like someone reaching into a bag of slogans hoping one might stick. And that's where the problem began, because her opponent wasn't throwing out vague ideas or playing the outrage game. He was speaking plainly, saying that people are tired of being talked down to, tired of slogans that don't translate into real change. While Whoopi flailed in abstraction, the response hit with precision. What people want isn't a lecture, they want results. It was a moment where clarity cut through the noise, and the audience could feel the difference. One side leaned on emotion and ideology, the other on logic and lived reality. And in that moment, Whoopi's arguments didn't just fall flat, they exposed a deeper problem within The View itself, one that wasn't going to stay hidden for long. The cracks in The View's foundation became impossible to ignore. What was once positioned as a space for diverse opinions began to look more like a closed circuit tone that couldn't handle disagreement without turning hostile. Whoopi Goldberg's approach during the exchange only amplified that perception. Instead of presenting a clear, reasoned counterpoint, her tactic felt more like throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what might stick. She veered off topic, redirected the focus, and leaned on emotionally charged rhetoric rather than substantive arguments. It wasn't just ineffective, it was transparent. And the response? Swift and unforgiving. Each misstep she made was dismantled piece by piece. The contradictions, the misdirections, the vague appeals to political correctness, all of it was laid bare. It wasn't just about the content of her words, but the way she used them. Her defense felt rehearsed, like it had been lifted straight from a social media echo chamber rather than built from conviction. The reaction wasn't limited to one commentator. Audiences watching across platforms saw what happened and didn't hold back. Comments flooded in pointing out that Goldberg, instead of engaging in real dialogue, resorted to buzzwords and deflections. And that's exactly what her critics were waiting for. Because when your entire playbook is built on misdirection, it only takes one well-aimed spotlight to show there's nothing underneath. The fallout wasn't just about one bad argumented, it was about exposing a pattern. And for The View, this wasn't the first time the curtain had been pulled back. It was just the most glaring. This pattern isn't new and it isn't exclusive to Whoopi. The View has a long history of turning spirited discussion into ideological crossfire. But this time, the spotlight was fixed squarely on Whoopi, and what it revealed was a playbook that's been overused and underwhelming. She took issue with the notion that Black Americans care more about economic stability, jobs, and community safety than abstract moral grandstanding. But instead of confronting those points head-on, she twisted them into something they weren't, injecting unrelated political agendas and activist jargon that only muddied the conversation. What should have been a dialogue became a deflection. Meanwhile, her critics didn't budge. They argued that these are not controversial points, they're basic needs, universally shared. People want affordable groceries, good schools, and a police force that shows up when called. Period. But Whoopi's response made it seem like acknowledging those needs was somehow dismissive or out of step with the social justice narrative she champions. That was the turning point. The moment where many watching began to realize this wasn't just a difference in opinion, it was a fundamental disconnect. A refusal to accept that someone could care about social issues without dressing them in performative language. Her critics didn't let that slide. They pointed out how clinging to identity politics at the expense of practical solutions wasn't activism, it was obstruction. As the dust settled, it became clear. This wasn't just about one episode or one exchange. It was about how The View, and Whoopi in particular, had lost touch with the very audience they claimed to represent. And for those tired of seeing real issues buried under buzzwords, the frustration was just beginning. And that frustration spilled over not just with Whoopi, but with The View as a whole. What once branded itself as a forum for powerful female voices now looked more like a high-production echo chamber. The latest clash didn't just reveal weak arguments, it exposed a toxic dynamic at the core of the show itself. The show thrives on outrage, on drawing lines in the sand, and pitting one ideology against another. But instead of creating meaningful conversation, it's turned into a circus act of gotchas, gasps, and groupthink. When Whoopi fumbled through her responses, it wasn't just her credibility on the line, it was the entire show's ability to foster real, productive discourse. The criticism was swift. Her rebuttals felt more like performances than genuine attempts at dialogue. Her smirks, her dismissive gestures, her insistence on framing every issue through the same tired ideological lens all landed poorly. And then came the most brutal comparison yet. The View as the political talk show equivalent of a train wreck, painful to watch, impossible to look away from. That metaphor stuck, because it captured exactly what audiences had been feeling. The View had stopped being a platform for competing ideas and had become a stage for ideological gatekeeping. A place where disagreement wasn't welcomed, it was ridiculed. And this moment, this collision between Whoopi's defensiveness and the sharp critiques it provoked, this was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay years of built-up resentment from viewers, tired of the condescension, tired of the spin, and tired of watching real issues get steamrolled in the name of political theater. But the spotlight wasn't only on the View. It turned toward a broader cultural issue that's been simmering beneath the surface. The environment surrounding the show, and others like it, mirrors what's happening across politics and media: a rise in performative outrage, tribal loyalty, and a refusal to engage with uncomfortable truths. That's exactly what made the latest takedown so sharp. It wasn't just about Goldberg's argument, it was about what her argument represented. A trend where ideology becomes armor and where emotional appeals replace facts. In this world, it's not about who's right, it's about who yells loudest, who gets the final word, who wins the moment. And what happens when you challenge that system? You get labeled, dismissed, or dogpiled. That's the space the View operates in, a place where the moral high ground is claimed not earned. And once someone is painted as the other, their points are no longer debated, they're discredited. That's what made this moment resonate so deeply. The criticism didn't just call out Whoopi, it called out an entire mode of discourse that punishes independent thought. One where you're not encouraged to think you're pressured to comply. But this time, the pushback was different. It was focused, relentless. And it hit the nerve that so many feel but rarely see articulated on mainstream platforms, that the loudest voices preaching tolerance often have the least room for dissent, that the spaces claiming to fight for justice too often turn into echo chambers that shut people out the moment they ask the wrong question. In calling this out, the critics didn't just challenge one opinion, they challenged the culture that gave it a pedestal. And then came a moment that perfectly illustrated the double standard critics had been pointing to all along: the Hunter Biden pardon. President Joe Biden, who once boldly proclaimed that no one is above the law, turned around and pardoned his own son after a laundry list of corruption charges. The irony wasn't subtle, was blinding. For a political movement that built its brand on accountability, this was the equivalent of setting that principle on fire in front of a national audience. Enter Charlemagne the God, guesting on The View, walking straight into the lion's den. When he called out the hypocrisy, it wasn't with anger, it was with simple, stunned honesty. If accountability is the standard, then it has to apply across the board. But when it came to Hunter Biden, suddenly the rules didn't apply. And Whoopi? She didn't flinch. She twisted herself into verbal knots defending the president's actions, suggesting maybe Biden just got tired of being taken advantage of. That this pardon was, somehow, an act of self-care. It was a moment that left the audience and even Charlemagne visibly baffled. It wasn't just that the defense was weak, it was that it exposed everything critics had been saying. When someone outside the ideological tribe messes up, it's a scandal. When someone inside the tribe does it, it's excused, explained away, or ignored entirely. This wasn't just about one pardon, it was about how far some are willing to go to protect their own, even if it means rewriting their values in real time. And it was in that moment, on live television, that the cracks in The View's credibility grew even deeper. What followed was nothing short of a demolition. The moment those excuses aired, the reaction was swift and brutal. Critics didn't have to twist Whoopi's words, they just played them back. The logic, or lack of it, spoke for itself. And when paired with the mountain of evidence against Hunter Biden bank records, testimonies, even video, there was nowhere for the argument to hide. That's when the broader narrative really snapped into focus. The so-called woke movement, as critics have labeled it, often prides itself on holding power accountable. But when that power wears the right jersey, the rules suddenly change. The outrage machine powers down, the moral compass goes silent. And in this case, it wasn't just Goldberg caught in the contradiction, it was the entire panel. They circled the wagons, brushed off clear ethical concerns, and acted like the problem wasn't the part in it was people daring to ask questions about it. That's not accountability, that's brand management. Critics pounced, not just on Whoopi's defense of Biden, but on the cultural rot it exposed. The idea that justice is flexible depending on who's in the spotlight, that truth doesn't matter when it's inconvenient. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was a blueprint of how trust in institutions gets eroded. And through all of it, one voice cut through. Enough with the selective outrage. If you claim to care about ethics, then act like it no matter who's at fault. That's what viewers were waiting to hear. That's what wasn't coming from The View. And that's why the fallout from this moment wasn't just reputational, it was foundational. And that foundation continued to crumble as more voices joined the chorus, pointing out a painful truth. The View had become less about informing and more about shielding. Shielding narratives, shielding allies, shielding themselves from criticism that dared to challenge their worldview. The moment Whoopi and her co-hosts brushed off serious allegations, critics didn't just see bias, they saw strategy, a calculated avoidance of accountability. And while the hosts may have thought they could spin their way out of it, the audience wasn't buying it. Not this time. The response was ruthless. Every excuse, every awkward deflection, every smug dismissal picked apart and exposed. Viewers weren't just watching a bad argument unfold, they were watching the credibility of the show unravel in real time. And when the spotlight turned to the media's role in this cover-up, it got even worse. The Hunter Biden story wasn't just mishandled, it was buried. Dismissed as Russian disinformation, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Outlets didn't just get it wrong, they actively suppressed it, all to protect a political narrative. Free speech? Investigative journalism? The cornerstones of a functioning democracy? Thrown under the bus to control the story. And The View, with its massive platform and loyal following, played right along. Instead of asking tough questions, they parroted talking points. Instead of holding power accountable, they helped it duck the consequences. That's why this moment hit so hard. It wasn't just about Whoopi's defense, it was about what it symbolized. A media culture more interested in damage control than truth. And for the millions watching, the message was clear. If trust in legacy media is collapsing, this is exactly why. And trust wasn't just collapsing, it was being torched. The illusion that The View stood for open conversation, for diverse perspectives, for truth, shattered. What remained was a platform where ideological loyalty trumped intellectual honesty, where groupthink wasn't just present, it was policy. Critics didn't let up. They pointed to the way dissent is treated on the show not as a spark for discussion, but as a threat to be extinguished. Opposing viewpoints aren't debated, they're dismissed with eye rolls, sarcasm, and carefully rehearsed talking points. And at the center of it all, Whoopi's demeanor had become the symbol of that dismissive Vanessa raised eyebrow here, a smug grin there, a wave of the hand to signal a conversation not worth having. But this time, it didn't work. The response wasn't intimidation, it was clarity. Every gesture of deflection only made the truth more visible. What The View had become was obvious to anyone paying attention. Not a talk show, but a fortress. One built to keep certain narratives in and all criticism out. And yet, the critics pushing back weren't playing by the old rules. They weren't asking for apologies or trying to cancel anyone. They were demanding accountability, logic, honesty, things the show once claimed to value. Instead, those things were replaced with ideological gatekeeping. If you don't speak their language, you're not just wrong, you're unwelcome. This wasn't just an embarrassing moment for Whoopi Goldberg, it was a mirror held up to the entire show. And what it reflected wasn't bravery or progressiveness. It was a culture afraid of real conversation, a place where debate has died, and only the script remains. That script, polished and rehearsed, might work on loyal audiences, but it doesn't survive real scrutiny. Because when the arguments fall apart and the talking points run dry, all that's left is the contradiction. And this time, it wasn't buried under applause or disguised with emotion. It was on full display. What made this takedown so devastating wasn't just the facts, it was the style. The rebuttal didn't come with shouting or personal attacks. It came with calm, surgical precision. Point by point, the inconsistencies were exposed. The contradictions were highlighted. The hypocrisy wasn't just mentioned, it was proven. Whoopi's attempt to discredit the criticism turned into an unintentional showcase of everything wrong with her position. And as the layers of her argument were stripped away, it became obvious. There wasn't much underneath. No real response. No grounded counterpoint. Just a flurry of buzzwords and blanket statements. The aftermath left more than just her credibility in question. It forced viewers to take a hard look at The View as a whole. A show that once claimed to welcome diverse voices had morphed into a gatekeeping machine more interested in protecting its own narrative than challenging it. And in that wreckage, one thing became painfully clear. The View had stopped being a place for debate. It had become a performance. A space where truth takes a backseat to optics and disagreement is treated like betrayal. But for those watching from the outside tired of being lectured, tired of the double standards, tired of being told what to think, this moment wasn't just satisfying, it was a wake-up call. The script had finally worn thin, and the audience was no longer clapping. What followed was more than a critique, it was a reminder. A reminder that honesty, clarity, and logic still matter, even in a media world drowning in outrage and buzzwords. And that reminder didn't come from a place of malice. It came from frustration, from watching the same cycle play out over and over, where emotion trumps facts and opposing views are steamrolled instead of heard. The clash with Whoopi Goldberg was just the latest example, but it represented something much bigger, a culture that's become addicted to outrage while allergic to accountability. Where the loudest voices claim to speak truth to power, but fall silent when the power wears their team colors. For years, The View has postured as a platform for tough conversations, for speaking out, for challenging the status quo. But the truth is, it's become the status quo. And its hosts, especially Goldberg, now act as gatekeepers of what's acceptable to say and what isn't. That's not progressive, that's control. And when challenged by logic real, grounded, unapologetic logic, they don't fight back with better arguments. They roll their eyes, change the subject, or fall back on tired narratives. But audiences are waking up. They're watching with sharper eyes and asking harder questions. Not because they're trying to win a culture war, but because they're tired of being played. In a time where shouting has replaced thinking and virtue signaling has replaced values, the need for real conversation is more urgent than ever. And whether you agree or not, moments like this prove one thing. Calling out hypocrisy isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity is exactly what the public's been craving. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.